with you all this evening. I feel a little out of place in this gathering. We're talking about the web and the Christian. I had no idea that the web was Christian. Did you guys realize that? I don't know when along the way the web accepted Christ, but it's good to know that it's Christian. Anyways, it's good to be here, and like I said, I feel kind of out of place because here I am with a room full of technologists and communications gurus, and I don't have any videos to show you tonight. I don't have any PowerPoint or Keynote. I don't even own an iPad. I'm teaching from a moleskin. I feel very low tech tonight and amongst a group of folks that are very technology savvy. So I hope you'll put up with me. And the crazy thing is, it's probably the first time I've ever been in a room talking on a topic where I felt like everybody in the room was smarter than me on this topic. I don't know. We'll see how it goes, because my guess is everything I'm going to address this evening, there's some aspect of what I'm going to talk about that there are experts in the room. It's kind of a fun thing to come to a gathering where people, it's kind of like the body of Christ. It's like God designed it to be this way, where people come with different gifts, different passions, different skills, different experiences, and together, hopefully, we can help people take their next steps toward Christ. And that's really what I want to talk about this evening is I love technology. The funny thing about me is I'm a web guy. I love the internet. I love tools that we get to engage on the internet. I've been blogging for just over 6 years now, and I know that because I started blogging the week after my fourth child was born, and Brooke just celebrated her 6th birthday. So I can tell you I've been blogging for a number of years. So I love the web. The funny thing is I've been involved in web ministries and communications ministries for the years, and I've engaged those tools, but I've always built a team of people to do all of that for me. And so tonight, I can't come and tell you how to do the web. I can't tell you how to really engage social media because you all know how to do that. But what I want to challenge you to do tonight is to take a step back and look at why is it that we do what we do. And so tonight I want to talk about how we can use the web to engage our audience. And I'm basically going to be talking through 3 questions. Now, again, because I came with no tools to present tonight, and I didn't come with any notes for you either, this is what I've done for you. And this, I've learned along the way, this is a way to get people to go to your website too. Because what I've done is I've put all the notes for tonight's session online on my website. So if you're following along at home, you can just go to TonyMorganLive.com and all the notes are there. So now, if some of you want to actually take notes tonight and act like you're listening, that would be great. It would make me feel good, but you don't necessarily need to do that. So we're going to be talking about 3 questions tonight, and I'm just going to give you the punchline right up front. The 3 questions are this: who is your audience? What are you going to ask them to do? And then how are you going to connect with them? Those are the 3 questions we're going to talk about this evening. And the reason why is, well, let me ask, first of all, I work at a church. How many folks in the room are connected in a church in some way? Okay, well, good portion of you. The kind of stories I'll share this evening are obviously going to come from my ministry experience, which is primarily with the church, but the principle should apply regardless of the type of ministry you're involved in. And for me, ministry begins with this basic principle. For me, as a pastor in a church, people come to our church at one spot in a spiritual journey. Now, some folks may not even realize it yet because they're still considering the claims of Christ. Others have they're new in their faith, they're new to the church. Others, we would consider them to be spiritually mature, whatever that looks like. But they connect in our churches at this point. And ultimately in the church, and I would guess this would be the case in many ministries too, ultimately our goal is to get them to point B, which is to become a fully devoted follower of Christ. Now the great thing is everything that we do in our ministries and churches or whatever ministries you're connected in. We have all these programs and events and solutions that we offer. And for us specifically talking about web technology and communications and social media, everything that we do, hopefully, if we're engaged in ministry, is helping people take their next step toward Christ, helping them move from point A to point B. And that's why I think these three questions are so important, because if we don't remind ourselves and kind of step back and ask these three questions, what we can end up doing is, well, in church I call it just doing church. We can end up doing all of the ministry, the programming, the events, using the technology. We could end up doing that, not remembering that ultimately we need to help people move from point A to point B. We need to help them take their next steps toward Christ. So let's begin with the first question. The first question is this: who is your audience? Who is your audience? And now for me, again, I'm connected to a church. There are really two groups of people. When we start to look at anything that we do online, we're considering two groups of people. The first group are the folks that aren't yet connected to our church. I don't know in your ministries what those folks may look like, but I think it's good to consider who is it that could potentially be connecting to your church or to your ministry. The first question that these folks are asking is, do I belong? So they're coming, they're engaging with us online through social media or website. The basic question they're asking is, do I belong? Pew Research Center did a study, this is back in September, just a few months old. They found that 58% of Americans perform online research concerning the products and services that they're considering to purchase. And I'll tell you, in ministry, we're seeing the same thing. Is before people step foot into our church, they're going to visit us online. Now, the crazy thing is, for churches, I don't know, I'm assuming this might be the case for other ministries as well, the challenging thing is they're not typically designing their web presence for that group. Typically, they're designing their web presence for this other group, which we're concerned about, and those are the people that are already connected to our ministry. So you have these two audiences. One, they're considering, do I belong? And then this other portion of our audience is already connected. Now, like I said, the crazy thing is, in churches in particular, we design our web strategies, our social media strategies. Honestly, we design all of our ministry programming around that second group. Now, what I have found is that if we prioritize the first group, we can still help the second group take their next steps toward Christ. But when we prioritize the second group, we alienate the folks that are considering, do I belong? Do you see how that might be the case? And so that's why when I'm working with churches and looking at communication strategy and web strategy, I'm challenging them to make sure they're listening to the right people and considering the right audience when they're designing what their strategies need to look like. The second group, that second audience, that's an important audience. We need to engage those people. The main question those people are asking is, what is my next step? So you have two portions of that audience that you're trying to reach. The group that's trying to consider, do I belong? And then the group that's already connected, they already belong, and they're trying to figure out what's my next step. Now, like I said, at least what I find in church world, what I find is we tend to get quickly focused on that second group. And as a result of that, we tend to ask our leaders, we tend to look to our ministry leaders first, and we ask our ministry leaders, what are the ministries that you need to promote? And so whenever we start designing what we do on the web, through social media, everything we do in terms of using those technologies, usually we're asking our ministry leaders first, what do we need to promote? Rather than asking the question, how do we help people take their next step toward Christ? And as a result of that, what ends up happening is we have all of these ministries here between point A and point B. We have all of these ministries that they're working hard, they're trying to engage, they're trying to help people take their next steps. They start competing against each other, And this is honestly the most challenging thing that I see, especially in today's culture, is the web just becomes an add-on for what the church is doing, rather than looking at how can we truly use the web to engage people in helping them take their next steps toward Christ. So in the church anyways, ministry leaders will start designing events, they'll start designing programming, and then after all of that's completed, then they'll figure out, well, how can we use the web to promote what we're doing offline? And so unfortunately, what I see in church world is everything that we do in ministry is built around offline activities, rather than on the front end considering how can we use the web to help people take their next steps toward Christ. So what ends up happening is we have this very one-sided relationship. You might consider it a bullhorn strategy. Basically, we have ministry leaders, churches, ministries across the country with their bullhorn standing on the corner of what apparently is the Christian web, so this is good, standing on the corner shouting things like this: come to our services on Sunday. Let me tell you about our men's ministry. Join us for the church golf tournament. Serve on our ministry teams. Give to our church. This is what we believe. And it's all of this one-sided conversation that's happening. And basically all we've done is we've taken the church worship bulletin and we've put it online. And so the web, for most churches, and I would guess for most ministries too, it's just become an avenue for us to kind of throw out our agenda rather than engaging a relationship. And I think web ministry, unlike anything else we do within our ministries, it needs to be about a two-way relationship. It needs to be about investing in people, helping people take their next steps toward Christ together. Now, this looks like a smart room, so I'm pretty confident that you'll all have the answer to this. Again, I pastor at a church, and we have people that show up to church every Sunday. It's a great thing. What would you guess the #1 reason is that people show up to church for the very first time? What would you guess? This is where you can talk back. What would you guess?
Somebody invited someone.
Someone invited them, yeah. In fact, I've actually done like statistical research. I have a business degree too, so Dave, you'll appreciate this. I got a couple statistics courses in my background, which just makes me dangerous. That's all that does. But I've done the research a couple of times, and between 75 and 80% of the people, both times that we did the study, came to the church for the first time because a friend invited them. What I find interesting in church ministries in particular is that once people get inside our churches, we forget that. We forget that relational aspect about how people take steps. And so as soon as people get inside the church, every step, next step we assume people take, whether that's going to be in a small group or engaging with a men's ministry or a women's ministry, if it's attending an event, if it's serving in ministry, no matter what that next step looks like, we automatically jump to promotions mode as leaders. And so rather than remembering, people got to this church because they were in a relationship with someone and someone invited them to be here, once they get inside the church, we go into promotions mode. I call this the giant inflatable blue monkey syndrome. Are you familiar with the giant inflatable blue monkey? Back where I am in Atlanta, they typically show up in front of car dealerships. You've seen them, haven't you? I mean, they blow up these monkeys, they put them out in front of the car dealership. Apparently they think they're going to sell cars. In fact, I've dreamed, what that leadership team meeting might have looked like. It's a Monday morning, the car dealership has just gone through another slow weekend of sales. The leadership team for the car dealership comes together in the conference room. They're trying to figure out what in the world are we going to do to turn around car sales. And one of the leaders raises his hand and he says, I got an idea. What would happen if we made better cars? And then they realize that, they can't do that. There's no way they can improve how automobiles are made, so that's not going to work. So they continue talking and they're thinking, and another guy raises his hand and he says, I have an idea. Why don't we improve the customer service experience at our car dealership? And then they realize, well, that would take a lot of work. We can't do that. We can't improve our customer service environment. And then I always picture us the rookie on the team. I don't know, it might not be, but I picture the rookie raising his hand and saying this: I have an idea. Why don't we call the rental company and get ourselves a giant inflatable blue monkey? And then everybody looks around and realizes, that's it. That's going to sell more cars. We need the giant inflatable blue monkey. Well, the crazy thing is, in churches that I work with across the country, the giant inflatable blue monkey exists. Almost every church I go into. Only, rather than a real inflatable animal, what it is everything we do to promote what we do in our bulletins, and we have PowerPoint slides before our services, we do email blasts, we do texting, we do phone trees, and we create videos to promote, we create t-shirts and logos and direct mail postcards. Every time we want people to take a next step in our ministry from point A to point B, we think we have to pull out the giant inflatable blue monkey. And what I just want to challenge you all to is, ministry is not about promotions. Ministry is about relationships. Amen. And what a great thing that we're seeing that even carry over to web ministry as well. Web ministry, social media, social networking, it's about engaging relationships with people. And if we're going to help people move from point A to point B to take their next steps toward Christ, we have to remember that ministry is about relationships. So here's the key thought for this section. Most ministries build websites to keep ministry leaders happy rather than help people take their next steps. And we need to be making sure that we're building communication strategies and web strategies that are intentionally helping people take their next steps toward Christ. Now, I was going to do some discussion, but I don't know if we're going to have time for that tonight. So here's the discussion question for you when you go home with your teams to talk about this particular section. This would be a great conversation to have with your teams. Thinking about your web strategy and your communication strategy, what's the purpose for your website or your social networking strategy, whatever you want to put in there? What's the purpose of your website and who is it reaching? And then maybe more importantly, how do you know that? So that'll lead to some good conversation when you get home, because that'll help you think about, are you really addressing that first question of who is your audience? Now the second question then is, once we've determined who the audience is, you need to ask this question: what are you going to ask them to do? What are you going to ask them to do? I call this the Apple test now. Because if you were to go to apple.com tonight, and you don't even have to do this, I'm guessing you would know the answer. If you were to go to apple.com tonight, what do you think you would find on their website?
Beatles.
What?
The Beatles.
The Beatles? Well, at one point you did.
Yeah.
Think about Apple right now.
Yeah,
The iPad 2. Yeah, and it could have changed overnight, but last I looked, you go to their website, there's one big banner with that picture of that iPad 2. Trying to make every guy in the world like me that doesn't own an iPad yet jealous that he doesn't own the iPad 2. And it's working. It's the one thing principle. It's the Apple test. It's when people land on our website, do they know the one thing? Do they know what we want them to do next? And again, because churches and ministries, well, they value fairness over focus. For some reason, especially within churches, we think fairness should be a value. And so every ministry in the church gets treated the same way. The problem is, for the person that's standing right here, they don't need every ministry in the church. They just need to figure out what is their next step toward Christ. There was this research study done several years ago. They went into a grocery store. They did taste tests. They offered 2 instances. In one instance, they had 24 varieties of jam. In the second instance, they only had 6 varieties of jam. Now, as you would guess, where there were 24 options available, that caught people's attention. More people stopped at that location. But interestingly enough, the same number of people tasted the jams in both instances. But this is what was fascinating. Where there were 24 varieties, only 3% of the people actually made a purchase. Where there were only 6 varieties, 30% of the people made a purchase. And what the study helped us figure out is this is the way God has designed us. For whatever reason, the fewer options we have available, the more likely we are to make a decision, to take a step, to make an action. But again, churches aren't designed this way. We're trying to help people become fully devoted followers of Christ. And we have all of this ministry programming, all of these ministry events that we throw at people. And this includes through our websites, through our social media. So we're throwing out all of these options. Number one, it's not because we think that's going to help people. I think it just comes down to we don't want to say no to people. We're trying to treat everybody the same way because we don't want to be the bad guy. But in the process of doing that, we're making it harder for this person to figure out, well, how do I take my next step toward Christ? So we're creating all of this confusion for people because we haven't really nailed down the question or the answer to the question, what are we asking them to do? Now, let's do this. I like to have a little bit of interaction. So why don't we do this? We're going to pretend that we're going to plant a church tonight, okay? And what I need is I'm going to hire the staff that's going to plant this church. I'm guessing within this room we might have the right level of experience and giftedness to cover this. Has anybody done any teaching before? Go ahead, raise your hands. Okay, you're going to be our teaching pastor, so step away from the computer, come up front. Has anybody led worship before? You're a worship pastor, come on up. How about youth ministry? Anybody done student ministry before? Student ministry is the right label. We're not allowed to call it youth ministry. Student ministry, oh, hey, there you go. How about kids ministry? Anybody have any experience with that? No one's had to be in the preschool or, oh, I see, I know. Come on up. Let's see what other ministries we do. How about small groups? Anybody in groups or Sunday school classes or anything like that? Anybody had any? Okay, yes, you in the back. Have you been in a group before?
Yes, I teach children's ministry.
You're going to be our pastor over groups.
Good call.
All right, what else? What else should we do? Let's do, how about missions, outreach into the community? Anybody involved in that area of ministry in their church? Come on up. Another Tony?
Yeah.
Your name's Tony?
Tony.
Oh, man.
Good name, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah. All right, so this, we have 6 people. Come on in closer. Let's get names here. Tony, you're the outreach guy. Where are you from?
Modesto, California. Patterson, California.
Okay, very good. Good to have you on the team.
Thank you so much.
And Song, where are you from?
Anaheim.
Anaheim. You're the small groups pastor. You probably didn't come tonight thinking you were going to be the small groups pastor, did you? No, okay, Tim. And you're the
youth pastor.
You're the youth pastor. Good deal. Don't overspend the budget. Okay. You're the worship guy. Okay, give us a few bars then.
Sure.
No. All right. And Lenny, you're the teaching pastor. You want to take over? I could. And where are you from?
Redlands.
Redlands. And you're our
Children's
kids.
ministry.
All right. Good deal. All right. So we're planting a church tonight, and look. All of these people are already coming to our church. Isn't that fantastic? Isn't that phenomenal? You guys are doing a great job. Now, here's the deal. I know as ministry leaders, by the way, we have a really focused ministry at our new church. We only have 6 ministries represented. But here's what I know. You all are leaders. You all are passionate about your areas of ministry. And if I were to give you the podium, the pulpit at our church, I know that you all would have at least one thing that you would want to communicate to the church related to your areas of ministry, okay? So I'll give you a moment. Think if I gave you the platform and you had the opportunity to tell the church about a next step that you wanted them to take in your area of ministry, what would that be? Think about that for a second. You got something in mind? Okay. On the count of 3, I want you to verbalize that to the church, okay? You ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Reach the home. Weekend outreach.
Drop within weekend.
All right, now wait a second. Did you hear what they were talking about? Did right. Anybody have the gift of interpretation? All right, here's what I think. The church didn't quite get that, but what I think is if you all do it a little bit louder, there's a chance that they might hear it this time, okay? So on the count of 3, here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Reach the home.
Jesus.
Outreach event. It'd be great for the kids.
All right. Well, I appreciate you helping out with the illustration, but you all are lousy as church staff. So yeah, that's right. Okay, so folks, it's kind of comical when we do it like that. But here's the crazy thing. When we design our communication strategy and our web strategy and our ministries, I'm afraid that's what it sounds like to the people that we're trying to reach. We have all of these messages that we're spewing out from our organizations, all of them with the same volume. We're pushing them through every communications channel that we can think of. And we're doing all of that, you know, and our hearts are pure. We want to help people take their next steps. But because we're not being intentional about what we're communicating, when we're communicating it, how we're communicating it, because we're not being intentional with that, the folks standing here trying to get down that path, it's just noise, it's just confusion for them. And so part of that's why I'm asking this question here is what is it exactly that you're asking people to do? What do you want people to do next? I think part of the reason why it's tough for us to answer that question in ministry is it's because of a gap that exists. My wife and I went to London a few months ago, and has anybody else in the room been to London before? If you get to London and use, they call it the tube, the subway system, whenever you get down in the tube, you always get this warning to mind the gap. You hear the guy on the speaker system saying mind the gap. They have it painted on the platform. When they talk about mind the gap in the tube in London, they're talking about the gap between the train and the platform. Well, in ministry, there's a gap that exists as well. And the gap is between the vision that hopefully God has given the church or the ministry that you're a part of. There's a gap between the vision and the people that are ready to serve, and they're ready to make that vision happen. And what happens is between the vision and the execution is we haven't clarified the systems and strategies. And so we as leaders think it's all about the vision. Vision is important. It's important to an organization because without the vision, we wouldn't know where we're heading. But what happens is you have great leaders, great communicators, great men of God trying to communicate a vision to a congregation or an organization, have great vision out there. You have a bunch of people over here, they've bought into the vision. They're ready to go. They're ready to make it happen. But they don't know what to do because organizations haven't clarified their systems and their strategies. And so there's this gap that exists, and I just feel sorry for communications leaders and web strategy leaders in our organizations, because the reality is until the ministry or the church or wherever you work figures out what is going to fill that gap, it's impossible to have clear, focused communications or web strategy. It's just impossible. And so, again, the main question is, what are you going to ask people to do? How are you going to ask people to take their next step? In the E-Myth Revisited, Michael Gerber said this: what makes people work is an idea worth working for, along with a clear understanding of what needs to be done. And so what ends up happening is because we haven't clarified our ministry strategy, it gets really difficult to get focused with our web or our communication strategy. So here's the key thought here. We don't need to tell the entire story with our websites or with our communication strategy. We just need to help people take their next steps toward Christ. And so here's the discussion questions when you get home. This will make for a fun conversation here. Here's the question for you to go back home with. What's the one thing you want people to do when they land on your website, or again, wherever you're engaged in social media, or wherever that might look like? What's the one thing you want people to do? And then the follow-up question is it happening? And again, that should lead to some fun conversations with your teams. All right, so that brings us to the third question. The third question is this: how are you going to connect with them? So once you know who your audience is, and once you've determined the next steps that you want them to take, the next question is, how are you going to connect with them? And the great thing is, I mean, with web strategies, I mentioned there's two big questions that when I'm working with a church that I want them to really make sure that they're addressing. And one of those is, do I belong? And the other question is, how do I take my next step if I'm already connected? If you can address those two questions, you're going to have a great web strategy. But the reality is there's this third way that we can engage people, and that's by using compelling content and by engaging the tools that will help us build relationships with people. And the great thing is, in today's internet, they go hand in hand. Compelling content and that engagement of people relationally online, they go hand in hand. And so I really do believe that conversations can form on the web around great content. Now, the great thing about today's web is we don't get to control our message anymore. Remember the days where you had, especially in politics, the guys that were trying to spin and get the message to go kind of their direction? Well, we don't have any control of that anymore. We get to participate in the conversation, and we may have more or less influence in the conversation. A lot of it depends, though, on the type of relationship we've built with the people that are kind of in our audience or in our crowd. And so I shared this a couple days ago. I'm just going to breeze through this because all of this is on the web. But I'm a list guy, and that's one of the reasons why I provided my notes to you. And so I have a top 10 list here. I wish I was as humorous as David Letterman, but I'm not. He's a funny-looking guy, though, so I'm going to say I'm better looking. But what I have right here are the 10 ways to generate better content. So, and I think these apply. Like I mentioned, I blog. I think they apply on our ministry websites. You may be engaged in video, and I think these same principles apply there too. This is a quick top 10 list here. Number one, we have to tell stories. And it's always helpful, I think, if it's a personal website, if a lot of those stories revolve around you. If you're in an organization, if those stories revolve around the people that are being helped and the people that are helping. I mean, that's stories, I don't know what it is. As pastors, as preachers, we can have all of the scriptural truth that we can throw out to people, and for whatever reason it is, at the end of our message, what they remember most are the stories we tell. But then again, Jesus told a lot of stories too, so maybe there's something to that. Secondly, we need to create compelling headlines. And this is just because this is where our culture is. Dave mentioned I just released an ebook. Part of the philosophy behind that is because I don't think you're going to read books anymore. I think the attention span that we have, it's getting smaller and smaller. And so part of why headlines are important and however we create content on the web, it's because people are scanning through the content that comes at them day after day. I use Google Reader, I'm sure a lot of you do. I subscribe to maybe 100 different RSS feeds. And I probably only read 10 articles of the hundreds that come at me day after day. And the only reason I read those is because there's a compelling headline. So it's important to make sure that we're using that moment to really grab people's attention. I mentioned number 3 is make it scannable. And so again, I wish we could just write full-length books and do full-length movies and all that we do in ministry, but our culture is looking for the bullet points, the list, the pull quotes, the bold print. We need to engage things like that so that as people are scanning, we're helping them grab the content. Number 4, we do need to use pictures and video. It's interesting here, where are the stats? have that here. ComScore study, this is from February, this is pretty recent. 82.5% of the US internet audience viewed a video online in February. And this is what's interesting though, and this is from last May, ComScore again, the duration of the average online video was only 4.3 minutes. And the crazy thing is, again, I'm in church ministry. Almost every video that we have on our church website is of the message, which is 40, 45 minutes. People are not going to watch 40, 45 minutes of video online. But here, we do that because every other church does that. We never ask the question, how do I help this person take their next steps toward Christ, right? And so how are you using your website? How are you using your social networking? Are you creating the compelling stories that are going to grab people's attention? We do need to use pictures and video. Number 5, you need to become a thought leader. Now this is going to go against what I just said, but in order to become a thought leader, you have to read something other than another pastor's blog. You might want to pick up a book every once in a while on something that's completely unrelated to where you work or how you play or whatever. Let God stretch you in ways through what you're reading through Scripture, but also through your reading in a variety of different books. Number 6, you got to meet readers' needs. You need to, and the only way that you can do that is if you develop relationships with people. And so you can't just be here saying, I think I know what they need, and I'm just going to spew information at people and promote and spew and promote. You actually have to develop a relationship with somebody to help them take their next steps toward Christ. Number 7, you want to generate a reaction or prompt an action. If you're just giving information, it's probably not going to move people. You want to generate a reaction. Number 8 is be vulnerable. And this is where I love where we are now, especially in church ministry. It used to be the pastor who stood in front of the congregation every day or every Sunday had to come across as being infallible, without sin. Well, we all know that's not the case. And the great thing is we now have real people standing in front of real people talking about how they're figuring out this path in their spiritual journey and engaging with what's happening in our lives today. And so we need to make sure that we're sharing not only successes in our lives, but the challenges, the mistakes, the things that we're facing. That builds authenticity. We need to use humor. That's number 9. And number 10 is, again, just where we are as a culture, we need to keep it brief. And always our tendency is to go too much information and too long information, I guess, to not make what we're delivering concise enough for people to really engage. So some thoughts on what it is to bring better content together. Here's kind of where I am on all this. Is I think there are kind of 3 phases of where we're headed with our web strategy. We've been through the first phase, which is when we're trying to engage with our audience. The first phase is this: take our information. And unfortunately, in church world, a lot of websites are still built around that take our information philosophy. And then we've started to move into the second phase, which is more of kind of taste our experience. And we have churches now that are offering samples of what's happening in their services and their classes. They're helping people kind of taste the experience of what's happening in the church. But again, most of what that is just taking what's happening offline and moving some of that online without thinking about, is this really helping people take their steps? It's almost an afterthought. I think the phase we're moving into is help us create the story. And the more that we can involve people relationally in helping us create the story and how we look at our web strategy through all of the tools that we have available to us, that's when we're going to really see this movement and helping people take their next steps in their spiritual journey. So those are the 3 questions. We talked about, again, who is your audience? What are you asking them to do? How are you going to connect them? At the end of the day, you may have all of the fancy tools, functionality in your website. You may be engaging all the cleverest new social networking tools out there with Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and so on. You may have the greatest content ever. You may be gifted writers and photographers and creating splendid video. But at the end of the day, I just want you to make sure that you're asking this question: are we really helping people take their next steps toward Christ? Because that's when we'll know whether or not we're really using the web to engage our audience.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.